Yeah, you are now live.
Right. Everyone, welcome to this abbreviated meeting of the Waterways Cabinet. So we were going to have a full meeting with the stakeholders, which are you, and the staff participants, but there were a lot of people on vacation, and so we decided to have this just the stakeholders meeting, which we can do in the future on particular topics. We don't have to wait for the full meeting. We can do this more often if you guys choose to do that. We can decide it's a good idea. But Mike Johnson and the city staff have been working on this stormwater restoration workflow document, and all the staff have put in time on it, but it has not been shared until recently with you, who do a lot of the boots on the ground restoration work or are interested in work in your particular area in the city. So we thought this would be a good use of our time to do this shorter abbreviated meeting for an hour. And Mike, you can ask questions of Mike. You can walk you through the provisions that we're trying to streamline this process and make it work more effectively, more efficiently, and get better projects in the ground more quickly this way. And then we'll inform you when we're done about the next steps we're planning to do with this. But since we're not going to do minutes today because we don't have the full group, I'll reserve that for our next full stakeholder group meeting, which the mayor wants to hold in September, and we're working on dates for that now. So we'll approve minutes from the last meeting then. But let's go around and introduce ourselves real quick. I'm Jackie Guile, the Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. Mike?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, sorry about that. Good morning. I'm Mike Johnson. I'm the Director of Public Works for City of Annapolis.
Sam? Sam Bryce?
Yeah, I'm Sam Bryce. I'm the Chief of the Bureau of Engineering and Construction for Public Works.
Matt?
I'm Matt Waters, one of the city stormwater engineers.
And Mike Rosberg?
He's on mute.
Mike, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to relog in.
Okay, thanks, Mike. All right, and Marcia is on too from the city.
I'm Marcia Patrick, Assistant Director of Public Works.
Betsy McEwen.
Hi, I'm Betsy McKeown, an engineer in Public Works.
I think I got all of the city staff. Oh no, Racine.
Hi, Racine Hodo, City Manager's Office.
Okay, Barbara.
I'm Barbara Beeler. I'm new on the cabinet. I represent the Sierra Club, Anne Arundel County group. Earl Buckley decided that Earl decided that getting up this early in the morning was something I could do. He passed it on to me, and I'm very interested. So this works fine.
Thank you, Barbara. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Jim?
Oh, very excited.
Jim Burdick.
Jim Burdick. I'm the chair of the Seven River Commission.
Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Gay. I'm the Executive Director with the Severn River Association. Morning.
Morning. Betsy Love?
Hi, I'm a project manager with the Severn River Keeper program and past environmental chair at St. Luke's Restoration of Nature.
Okay. And Randy?
Hello, I'm a environmental commission Mountain Peak Research Consortium, managing a program for environmental careers for HBC.
Randy, you may want to log back, go out and come back in. You're coming through really kind of scratchy and slow. And I know you don't speak that way.
Yes, definitely.
Sarah? Sarah, you on mute?
No?
No? All right, well,
Sarah's on two she's
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got two computers. I think she's
Well,
logged on.
Sarah called, this is the Severn River Keeper. We'll see if we can get.
Sorry, yeah,
There
I
she
was
is.
having trouble logging in. It kept knocking me off, and then I guess it didn't. Sorry, yeah.
Okay, and then we have Jesse Iliff.
Hi, everybody. Jesse Iliff, Southwestern Road Riverkeeper with Arundel Rivers Federation.
So Jonathan Bland, who will be joining us from Arundel Rivers, is he your restoration project manager, Jesse?
His title is River Programs Manager, which means he will be doing kind of half river keeper work and half restoration project management.
Okay, good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Mike, I'm going to turn things over to you to walk us through the changes we've made here and your overall kind of approach to this project of revising the stormwater workflow document.
Okay, thanks. I guess, you know, what I would do is sort of just explain why we are making the change, and Racine did a lot of the work on it. So, you know, I mean, if she's okay, I would ask her to sort of go through it, right? If she's okay doing that. But so let me just set the stage for why we're doing it. The partnership that the city of Annapolis has had with its not-for-profits, largely not-for-profits, is an excellent idea. However, the implementation of a lot of the projects have had some challenges that have made the projects a little, you know, more difficult than they needed to be, in my estimation, and in the estimation of others. And in sort of trying to sort of streamline that process, there were a couple of things that we observed that we felt were sort of a little out of phase, that were contributing to this problem. The first is that there seemed to be inadequate discussion with the city or collaboration with the city prior to grants being applied for. So applicants often didn't have a solid understanding of what the city's requirements are for implementing such a project within the corporate boundary of the city of Annapolis. And that will pose a problem, not immediately, but as the project progresses, and particularly to get it closed out, you will find that because those boxes are not being checked off or requirements are not being satisfied, that it puts City of Annapolis staff in a very indelicate situation whereby it becomes increasingly more difficult for them to approve projects, or there are legitimate differences between understandings of what the city requires versus what is being done. So, you know, that seemed to be like a formula for problems. So we wanted to address that. Secondly, one of the other you know, big issues is timeliness of getting it into the workflow schedule for our staff, so that we can we're ultimately going to have to deal with somewhat with the maintenance of whatever is built. And we want to make sure that we get good as-builts. Now, the reason why we are sticklers for as-builts, people sometimes don't clearly understand why they are important, is that as-builts are the documents by which, when a project has to be maintained once it's built. So we built this wonderful stormwater project, environmental project. It's cleaning the water, it's doing beautiful things. But we all know that it just takes one or two storms, or over time, its performance will diminish if it is not properly maintained. So the question that really is begged, well, how do we ensure that this project that is built, that started off wonderfully, continues to perform at a high level? Much like when we operate our own vehicles or we maintain our homes, it's through preventative maintenance, periodic maintenance that has to be done in it. The as-built drawings are what allow us to be able to ensure that whatever is built, whoever is assigned to do the maintenance and so on like that, knows exactly what was built and therefore what they need to restore it to. In addition to, these projects will outlive us all, or most of us, and what we have to have record documents that we can pass on in the timeline of the city to future administrators. So the as-builts are really critical. Part of the problem of not communicating ahead of time is that the requirements for as-builts are often missed at certain points. So pipes could be buried and the data is not properly collected prior to that occurring to the standards that we require. And then it becomes impossible to really create a proper as-built. And then, we're sort of like on doing the good work that others have done, right? So I think that you have the general gist as to why we felt that, we needed to sort of tweak this system, this workflow that would allow projects to be built faster, built according to, standards that satisfy, not only the state law, but the city's requirements. And, gives us actual documents that we can use once the project has been done, to sort of keep things in good order. Okay, so having said that, Racine, do you mind sort of going through, because this is largely the work that you did, and
Yeah,
I think you
as a
can
matter
sort
of
of take us
fact,
through.
I can present the document unless you have one that you've already made changes to.
No, you could present what you
Okay.
had
Actually,
submitted.
Racine, you might not have the most recent one. If you're
Oh,
using
she
the
does
one I
not?
attached with the invite, it's the most recent one.
Okay.
Julian has it. He can pull it up.
Okay.
Actually, Jackie, I'm not sure if I do. I have the one you sent originally, but let me see.
That looks like it.
That looks like it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. So the document outlines different phases of projects as they go along. In the first phase of a project, what we have in this document is that the city is requiring a pre-application meeting. And in the pre-application meeting, the pre-application meeting, I can go ahead and schedule that.
And if I could sort of jump in, sorry, could I just jump in a little bit here, Racine? So this is sort of what I was talking about here, that during the pre-application meeting, it gives the stakeholders, the not-for-profits, or in this case, and city staff an opportunity to come to a meeting of the mind, to want to understand what it is that you are proposing to build. This is all done prior to your applying for the grant. Because if you apply for the grant, you might, without doing this, there are more likely than not will be critical items that are not included in your understanding and therefore in your application. So you will underfund. For instance, you may not request enough money to prepare as-built drawings, to the standards that the city requires. And then it will become sort of like a bit of a battle in the end. Or to be upset folks at the end because we're not getting what we need. All right. So this here sort of helps to put everyone on the same page, so to speak. Sorry, Racine, go ahead.
I was going to also jump in and say that also it lets whether the city is doing work in that same area or adjacent to that area. For example, like we have a contract with Greenvest that Betsy McEwen is the project manager on, and Betsy may have information. Probably has information that you're not aware of that could affect your project, or your project needs to work in collaboration with the other projects we have going on. So that's a really important point because we're doing so much work in both the Back Creek and Spot Creek watersheds. All right, Racine.
Okay,
And you don't have to do the city-led part, Racine, because that's just for us city folk.
Yeah, so I misspoke as far as me setting up any pre-application meeting. The Department of Public Works is going to take the lead in that aspect. of setting up pre-application meetings, and these meetings will include different departments within the city, which would be the city manager's office, the Department of Public Works, Planning and Zoning, the Office of Law, and if necessary, will include other departments if required, based on the project. Can we scroll down a little bit? So some of the things that will come up for projects is that depending on its location, if you're in the historic district, then you're going to need to contact Historic Preservation Commission and get input from them. So what we've done here is we've listed different organizations or agencies that might need to be part of the thought process of these projects. And again, it depends on what the project is and where it's located and what's being done. Can we scroll down? So we see the Maryland Historical Trust, the Port Wardens, the Annapolis Planning Commission, the Maryland Department of the Environment. And under the Maryland Department of Environment, there are divisions within the MDE that, depending on what's going on with the project, would need to be contacted. So this outlines what we're doing here is we're trying to outline what you may have come across and what would need to be done depending on the project. Can you scroll down? So along in this phase one would be a site visit. The site visit is very informative for the city, so that we get a chance to see what's going on, where it's located, ask questions, and get the project moving forward, and maybe even answer questions for whichever group is working on these projects.
Mary C, I just want to jump in and say also during the site visit, we have not only our stormwater engineers, but our civil engineers there, because they know where everything is underground, pretty much. Sam Bryce probably knows where all the bones are located. He's been with the city so long. So, these are things that you may not have considered when you were putting together your proposal, which can add cost. If we have pipes in your path, in your area of disturbance that you're planning, if we have other considerations, I know it talking about bringing in other divisions, even of the city, departments of the city. There needs to be, like at Back Creek, with the Maritime Museum's campus at Back Creek, there was an issue about turnaround for our emergency vehicles. So sometimes these are other considerations that come in, but a lot of things that are underground or connect to other systems in our infrastructure need to be considered. So that's a really important part of it, is the site visit, because it could add a lot of cost to your proposal, or you might have to revise your proposal to go around some of these systems.
Okay, also included in phase one of introducing the project to the city is a memorandum of agreement. And I am working, it's highlighted, I am working on getting sort of a sample memorandum of agreement, but it's going to be written based on each individual project. So if I get you a sample, it doesn't mean that that's exactly what the memorandum of agreement is. It just gives you an idea of what one would look like. So prior to finalizing the memorandum and after award of the grant. So I don't know if, I'm sure Jackie already said this, but all of this is done prior to submitting a grant proposal. This is just so that there are no surprises that come up, that so that we can fulfill what the grant is requiring, and so that we're moving smoothly on each project.
Right, and if I could just jump here on this here, there might be one tweak that might be needed. I think that if we are to go to the city council's budget and finance committee, that we should probably get clearance prior to getting a grant awarded, I would think. Right? What's your thought, Jackie? I mean, it seems as if we are that folks could be making an effort, and if the council were to say, nope, we're not taking it, then what do we do?
I don't,
Right.
no, not for the ones led for the not-for-profits. We don't need to go to city council for those.
Okay, so that shouldn't be, that should not be here. Okay, so maybe we need to adjust this particular paragraph, but you know, that's
Jackie, I thought that if there were projects that might have impact on future maintenance by the city, that had to go to finance committee.
I'll check on that, Sam. We have not been going to finance committee with anything since I've been here in the last 3 years. So I will check with that before we finalize this. Good point. Thanks, Sam.
Can I ask a question about that? This is Amy Clemens. We have in the projects we've done on the city property, where we've gotten all the approval from the city, but the city council members on those committees really never knew anything about them and didn't know that the requirements for the maintenance on those projects. So I don't know that. I mean, I think seeking approval for the grant by those would add a lot of time to any nonprofits grant application, but I do think that somehow those committees should know about the projects going forward, and that there will be some kind of maintenance or whatever that is involved in that cost for that.
right. I mean, you're right, but the committee, that it's not the full seated council
Right.
that we're going to, where we're stuck on that. We're going to the committee, and that the intent would probably be to exactly what you said, so they are aware that it's going to be X amount of dollars that need to be budgeted for, that's needed for a specific project or group of projects.
I just want to add that there's a monitoring component to some of these projects, so that would be another cost that we would want to make sure we're included in future costs to the city.
Right. So, I mean, so we might have to do some work on this, but it seems to me that if the budget and finance committee has to be involved, that they would seem to be, we would need to get their approval prior to the grant being, awarded. Right. So, because they may have objections that could impact it, I would think. But it's maybe something we could talk about more.
Yeah,
What do you think?
sorry. We need to talk about that because they never let me bring anything before finance committee when the city gets a grant. Until we have the grant in hand, and it's always frustrating because then we don't want to delay our grant. But
Yes.
we have to jump in, get into the finance committee schedule like right away.
Okay.
And yeah, they generally don't want to talk about it unless they know the grant's been awarded.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll work on
Okay.
that.
Okay, but we could talk about that offline. So go ahead, Rosie.
Well, I just wanted to emphasize and tie together those two comments, which is for nonprofits, sometimes a grant opportunity pops up that you were monitoring, and you've got 60 days or something to come up with some glorious proposal and do everything. And I hope that this whole process recognizes the needs sometimes to go for these opportunities while doing process at the same time, and that it doesn't undercut those chances for this, and there's a difference between submitting an application and getting the grant, because you may submit your proposal, let's say in April, but you may not hear until June.
Mm.
And so there's a time frame in there where one is just a wish, you hope you get the funds, and the other is, yes, you have the funds. So I don't know how that gets woven in, but I hope that I think setting a process is incredibly important. I think this is very solid work, but I hope we don't undercut those opportunities.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Barbara, that's a good point, and the process is not designed to sort of slow anything down, but I think it would actually help. Our intent is to help streamline the flow of work so that there are no bumps. It becomes less choppy, because if there's a misunderstanding in the beginning, we're sort of off on parallel tracks. They may not even be parallel. They might be diverging tracks, and then we're going to eventually run into problems somewhere down the road where the project is taking too long to be closed out, and it's causing angst for all parties concerned. Right? So that's really the intent. I don't see this as necessarily having to be a very lengthy process, but it's an essential process to make sure that we are working on the same page.
Yeah, and I think in those situations, and I know what you're talking about, it happens to me all the time. You get something pops up, there's a short window to get a grant proposal in, that you just immediately contact Mike, and in your contact, if you email him, tell him that this is a very short timeline and you need to set up a meeting as soon as possible, so that we know that, and we set up that meeting as quickly as we can. So the pre-meeting.
And Mike, you are the person we are contacting at.
Yeah, if you send it to me, yes, okay. I will. I will make sure that the right people attend.
I'd like to say I agree with Barbara completely, because what happens is sometimes grant opportunities come up because the state might see a project that they'd like to see happen, as happened with Severn River Keeper and the SPCA. They saw a project that would work really well with the type of regenerative process that we did at St. Luke's, and suddenly a grant opportunity becomes available. So, and in those type of timeframes, as Barbara was saying, there's very little time. And in that spirit, this project that you're doing here, this workflow, it's a great idea, Mike, and I appreciate this, because the whole process of design and permitting goes very, very slowly, and in the spirit of collaboration and helping the city meet their goals. I think this is a great idea. And that said, in the first phase, all of these steps almost helps us miss an opportunity to get a project moving forward when those type of opportunities show up, where for instance, SPCA came up, or the situation with Weems Creek with the project Sarah is working on with the county, a joint collaboration project there in the headwaters of Weems Creek. So in this spirit, I wonder if phase one might be more of a development project with city goals in mind, like to have Jackie and Mike there with a grantor to gain your support and collaboration on the concept, just the basic concept, not the 30% design process, but just a basic concept of how and what goals there would be in that project. so that you don't bring in all of these other agencies that would actually come in once the city and the private property owner is involved, come to an agreement that, hey, we can do this. There's interest in a funder. And at that point, then you would start to bring in all the other partners and bring them on board. And I wonder if this isn't something that you might want to do as a matter of policy to help these projects, these environmental projects, move forward in a more expeditious manner, to have a team that works on the same goals as Mike and Jackie have created with, I don't know, the Environmental Matters Committee, the Environmental Commission, a set of goals for the year, like we're gonna do XYZ number of projects, and will this idea that's just been brought up help us fulfill those yearly goals? And then have a team that comes in for phase 2 and brings in actually, Sarah is probably wants to jump in here. You would also need in phase 1 MDE and Army Corps to weigh in, because sometimes they have some guidelines that we can't overcome without them weighing in on the actual project and how it's designed. So it wouldn't be just the city stormwater engineer, but the state and the feds have to also weigh in on what actually would be the design that goes forward, the concept. Like we're doing at SPCA with the fact that non-tidal wetlands are essential to the state and feds goals, and we have to do something or the project doesn't go forward. So that, as we did in the very beginning for SPCA, we knew it was a very complicated project and that it would require supervisors in addition to regulatory line. And it proved to be very expeditious, because in that process, the supervisor was able to weigh in on the questions that the regulatory person had. And so we were able to walk away with that project knowing that non-tidal wetlands would be the focus, not so much downstream.
I think that's what Mike is trying to achieve with this pre-meeting, is just to make it as comprehensive as possible with the right staff in there. And, of course, we want to meet our goals. And for example, I remember David Barker bringing a project from the Back Creek Conservancy to us. And it was something that was not in our plans. And but we saw, what it would help us achieve our goals, and we added it to what we were trying to do.
Right. Yeah.
So no, this is exactly what the pre-meeting, and this is just making sure we're get all the information in there right up front, and making the organization that's doing the project aware of what they need to do. For example, Living Shoreline in St. Mary's, heavy involvement with HPC, and you need a consultant. So that was really important to their project in designing it. That's the kind of thing we want to do up front, so that people know what they're getting into and how much money they need to get, and if they need to revise their idea. That between the pre-meeting and the site meeting, it can help you out a lot to make a better project and make things go more efficiently. So I'm going to ask Racine to move on so we can get through the rest of this, and Mike can give us, what our next steps are going to be, and you can ask more questions.
Okay, so the next phase of working with the city on these types of projects would be the preliminary plan submission to the city. And as long as the project is approved by the Budget and Finance Committee, the list that is here tells you what we need to see in this preliminary submission. We put it at 30%, which would be the beginnings of conceptual drawings. So we're looking for the conceptual design drawings, preliminary design calculations, details on trees and environmental features, right-of-way requirements, any kind of public outreach that's going to take place. We're going to need you to meet permit requirements, or at least the beginning, or to know what is needed for permit to get a permits. Documentation of submission to the state of Maryland for any regulatory agencies, which is listed, the agencies are listed under phase 1, at least most of those that we've run into with past projects. Any forest conservation or critical area requirements, and a schedule or timeline for the project. All of this will be submitted to the Department of Public Works. After it's submitted, it's determined to be complete. Comments from the city will be sent to the organization working on the project, and any applications that should be submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers or MDE would be included in this part of the project. Any questions or comments on this piece?
We need to include property owners in this. All affected property owners
That's the public outreach. Betsy, it's the public
Yeah,
outreach part.
but
We
it's
can put it
way
in there.
after the fact, because you can't develop this thing unless you have all the property owners on board. So for instance, what if one of the property owners says no, then you're back to design and concept. So that needs to be, of course, the primary property owner has to be in the first phase. You know, you can't have a project unless you have the primary property owner signing a letter of commitment. But other affected property owners come up during the design, and they have to be brought on board before you can go much further into design.
May I ask a question? This is Sarah Holder. Hello?
You're very quiet.
Oh, I'm having trouble with my, can you hear me? at
Yes.
all? Okay. Question is, why are we going through the city process not simultaneous with MDE and Corps when you get to the permit review stage? You know, a pre-application site visit with Corps and with Corps and MDE is always integral, and frankly, they often are much more onerous than the city, or at least often should be. So, I mean, the city informs what the local issues are in terms of utilities and that sort of thing that's happening. But Corps and MDE are pretty, you know, they kind of run the show in terms of setting out what they will accept in terms of an ecological restoration. So our experience is that all takes an incredible amount of time. And if you can't run it through simultaneously, you're going to be at this until we're all a lot older and grayer than I already am. So, I guess my point is that we need some flexibility in here in order to be able to have some of these steps run coterminously. Is that the correct term? But it has to happen simultaneously at the same time. And you're getting feedback. And the other issue I would say is I am really questioning why it would be the requirement of the nonprofit and their folks to be reaching out to Maryland Historical Trust and all those people on our own. It would seem to me that when we come in and get our handler assigned to us by the city, or a person that's going to be understanding this project from the beginning to the end, assuming it hits a pre-application site visit threshold that Mike and other folks have determined it's a possible project, then they would be the ones sending it out to all of those agencies that they have to interact with, like the Critical Area Commission and those guys. That's how the county does it.
The county does it for you?
Yeah, we don't go directly to the Critical Area Commission.
Because what we've been doing, if it's like there's a project, let's say within the historic district, and it's the kind of thing where there would be a disturbance that would affect a historical site, or meet one of their other triggers, we would have our Historical Preservation Commission staff member at that meeting. And if you're in critical area, we'd have our critical area person from planning and zoning there. And then that's what they have been doing, is they've been identifying the next steps that would need to happen. For example, you will have to make a presentation to the Historical Preservation Commission, and they meet on X dates, and they're going to expect so much of a design by then. And that's your first, and it'll tell you the process and who you need to contact.
No, generally that's all runs through the county, but again, we don't have historic district commissions here. I used to be a historic district commission staff person, so believe me, I'm appreciative of the issues that you have to deal with. But generally that's interfaced from the county, or those folks.
So Mike, do you have any thoughts about having the agencies at the initial site visit? Like Army Corps and MDE?
Well, do you need to have the agencies there, or do you just need to know if it's going to be an issue? And at that point, then they come to some other meeting down the line, that you all set up.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on what is being proposed. I don't think that there's a standard answer or cookie cutter kind of an approach, right? Dependent on what the project scope is and where it is located would determine who would make sense. It would be prudent to have at the meeting, because the joint permit can take a long time for them to approve it, right, and review it. It's not something that's quick, and you really don't want to have missteps, or because that's going to really put a lot of deep six the project's timeline and everything like that. So I think that we would have to that during the pre-application, that's when we get a clearer understanding of who really should be involved in the project, through the concept phase, etc. Right, and what permits would be required and so on like that. And I'm not sure that we would really. I think that the way that Annapolis, as Jackie explained, is that if you have to something that has to go to the historic commission, it's normally the city staff. The person assigned can sort of serve as a resource, but I think that normally the applicant applies to the commission, right? And that's basically my understanding of how it works. So
yes,
yeah. So I don't think we would make a special change, because that's the standard Annapolis process, and it's the way it works here.
all right. All right, scene next.
Okay, in the phase 3, we spoke about this a little bit before about public outreach, but this is where we put it in our workflow. Any necessary or public outreach that would be necessary for the project would be taken care of in this phase. And the city's environmental programs coordinator, who is me, will assist the organization or the city staff with public outreach. Also during this phase, preliminary right-of-way plans would be submitted to the city, and any letters of intent or documents from property owners would need to be presented at this point. And the letters of intent would be a outreach to those property owners who would be directly impacted, where we may have to access their property in order to work on the project. I would say at this point, are there any comments or any questions about the public outreach being in this part of the workflow?
Well, as I was saying, the property owners who are affected, you have to have letters of commitment from them to even apply for a grant. So, for example, if we were going to get design and permitting from the Chesapeake Bay Trust at WAGPA, you know, that would be something that we would have to do in the very beginning at the design stage, when we knew that our preliminary design affected XYZ property owners. Now, the public outreach, you know, when you go out to the entire community, that I can see you're having in right. Phase 3, because then you have a definitive concept. You've gotten it approved by MDE and the Army Corps and the city, and you're ready to say to the community, this is what the city has planned to meet their watershed implementation plan, the state goals, federal goals, and this is going to stabilize and your this area, plus create clean water and quality habitat. Okay. Because at that phase, you do. I understand why you have it in Phase 3, because you do need to let everyone know in the surrounding area. But we like to do that. We like to start doing that in Phase 2 as well. We like to start doing community events, you know, inviting people into the project, that type of thing, to bring buy-in.
Good idea. Yeah.
So that you build up before you get to Phase 3.
Right. That's a fair point. Okay, so we might move some letters of intent up higher in Phase 1 or 2, and then you could do some of the public outreach in Phase 2 and continue into Phase 3. All right, let's move to Phase 4.
I did have a question. Randy, this is, where is the Annapolis Environmental Commission in all of this? Do they only get informed in Phase 3? Maybe a part of one? They're not listed.
That's a very good question. I was going to ask something similar to that, but
okay.
Yeah, I have another question too, though. So maybe we can come back to that.
It seems like somewhere along the line it should be informed. I would suggest in Phase 1.
Yeah. Currently they're not part of the process, but they very much want to be a part of the process. And I would say if they're going to lend any letter of support or anything, they would have to know in the Phase 1 arena. And Tracy, our staff liaison, so she would inform the Environmental Commission of proposed projects and give them an opportunity. Go ahead, Randy.
No, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
You're muted, Randy.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, I was saying it would make sense for Racine, and that's what usually is taking place. So
I had a question, Randy, though. Would it be purposeful or would it be a benefit for every project to go to the Environmental Commission? I don't know that it would.
I think it will. I mean, I've actually even expressed an interest in looking at public safety also as a concern, because like some of these playgrounds in the city have extremely major flooding when it rains, which is a stormwater issue. And so how can, some organization, commission, what have you, advocate to put a project together that would call for the overhaul of all of the city's public housing playground areas.
Right,
and
that's a specific issue that the Environmental Commission can help you with. But that means that would be the one that'd be one of them that would go to the AEC. But I don't see a benefit of sending everyone over there, every single project over there. It's gonna.
I think
slow
it's
it
the only
down.
ones that have an environmental impact. I think, especially as it relates to sustainability. I mean,
Okay.
I think that it's only. I mean, what other purpose is it for the Environmental Commission other than to review environmental projects? I mean,
Right, but why everyone? That's only my comment.
well, because all of them are within the limits of the city's.
Watershed restoration.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Why would you watch some and not others? I mean, that doesn't.
Jim, they're just an advisory commission. You know,
Right.
it's not like Board of Appeals. They're not going to make a decision or anything, but sometimes they do like to just, add a letter or
Okay.
that of support for a project.
Or not. Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to understand the benefit of doing that to the project.
Keep them overall informed of what's going on and legitimate and put a legitimate.
I was more so wondering about, what's in place for underrepresented populations, because one of the known historical factors of the city is the tale of two cities. And the fact that your downtown is not this, downtown for you is not the same as downtown for me. And so historically, there's been an extreme underinvestment and a maldistribution of wealth resources in environmental restoration throughout the city and the state, honestly. And so I see all of these different details and descriptions, and honestly, coming from someone from that community, it is an extreme, it can be a little turn offish because we already are struggling with understanding the technical details of these types of engagements. So I'm just curious what this plan is going to alter itself to represent as a modified version that can be implemented and is well introduced to communities of color and minorities throughout the city. And also I'm curious to know, will there be any recommendations for preference for minority-owned contractors for projects that are performed throughout the city?
So Randy, to just address real quick this topic, so both minority-owned contractors, and there's preference given for them in our procurement process when the city does projects, and some grantors will have that as a criteria in that a particular grant. So for a nonprofit applying to them, they will address that. But this is just for the process. This doesn't address, goals such as doing projects, the city's goals for doing projects in underserved communities, which we are talking about. We can modify some of our own city project goals around that. So bumping some of those projects up a little higher when we look at certain watersheds to address. We're talking about that already. But this document is just about getting the projects permitted and in the ground. It's just that process, which is not, this isn't a plan. It's how we review projects, how we look at them as the city and permit them and move them along, help move them along.
Jackie, I think under phase 3 public outreach, you could add a sentence in there, which is still part of the city process and responds to Randy and my concern. You could put and be mindful of outreach to underserved, underwealth community. That outreach isn't just to a narrow group of people at the Eastport Community Association, but to Hispanics and low income and handicap, big issue now.
So we could have an including, and we see affected property owners, underserved populations, other things that might be sensitive. We could do something like that, Barbara. Thank you.
Add that in, and I think make a major step forward.
Yeah, but back to Randy's. Randy, that's something we can get some recommendations from the AEC on ways to incorporate that and serving underserved populations and disadvantaged populations as part of the city's goals. We can work on that in the AEC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and also a big part of this is when you are going these walkthroughs throughout these communities, having people that look like the community that you're doing walkthroughs in. That's a big part of this as well. So I was just curious, what personnel you have in place that could commit to that type of best management practice for environmental restoration for underrepresented populations.
Sorry, Randy, are you referring to city staff or to
community?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not referring to community staff. I'm
Mm-hmm.
referring to city staff or
City
whoever
staff.
you all
Mm-hmm.
have determined as those who will be doing these walkthroughs. And
I see. Okay.
yeah, those individuals.
Right.
Do you understand my point in that, Mike Jones?
I do. Yes, I do. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Amy, do you have a question?
No, sorry. Did I raise my hand?
All right, let's move along. So I know that there's some changes that Mike made in when projects changes are made in the field and bonding and things like that. I know that he wants to get to and what the new approach will be in that area.
Okay, in phase 4, this is once the grant has been acquired and public outreach has been done and the requirements of the previous phases have been met. This is prior to getting all the permits in order. In this phase, we're looking for 90% drawings, and we also are looking for any final calculations, Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Commission concurrence if necessary. Any finalized agreements are in place. The grading application is submitted during this phase. The applications and all supporting documents would be submitted to the 3rd floor of 145 Gorman to the Department of Planning and Zoning for the city staff review, and also Anne Arundel County, Maryland Soil Conservation District. Also, during this phase, all agency reviews would be completed at this point. So if the Army Corps of Engineers is needed for the project, or any of the divisions within MDE or any historic preservation issues are all addressed at this point. Any questions?
All right.
Racine, I think it would be helpful. Your explanation made phase a little for clearer, and you talk about the timing and grant acquired prior. I think adding that into this for somebody who's from the outside who's reading it would be helpful. And just when this happens, I know it says final, but to define that, just a little added note.
Okay, thank you. In phase 5, this is after you've submitted your grading applications and you've submitted you've submitted all applications for permits. This is when the permits are issued. So all bonding requirements need to be satisfied. And the city issues grading permit and other permits as the applications are warranted. And any modifications in the field should be, let me back up a little bit. So you get your permits issued. So this means the project is moving forward and construction has started. So, or get started in this phase. So while working on the project in the field, if there are any modifications in the field, they need to be submitted to the Department of Public Works, the city's Department of Public Works, for approval. And they should be submitted within 3 days of the modification within the field. And this is to protect the project and make sure that any modifications would not significantly impair the future workings of the project.
Right. So, and then I'll just sort of say that again here, the expectation would be that if the modification is approved, the plan, a red line has to be made of the plan so that at the end we have the proper as-built, which is sort of like, preempting a little bit phase 6. But as I mentioned when I opened, the importance of the as-builts to the city. One of the problems that I'm speaking with our engineers is that sometimes projects are built that don't look any way at all. They're not de minimis changes that have been made. They are meaningful changes that have been made. And that really makes it very difficult for staff to approve the project, to approve the closeout of the project, because it hasn't complied with what was permitted. And, you couldn't do that with the core permit. And we wouldn't have an expectation that you would be able to do that with the city's permits, right? The permit is sort of key to the project, and de minimis changes are not a big deal, but major changes, right, meaningful changes are, because they affect how it's performing, and they could be legitimate reasons. Maybe what you thought initially couldn't really be done. The underlying strata is a bit different. Something, whatever occurred. But there has to be an organized way in which, changes are made. The contractor can't take it upon his or herself to just make the change because, they felt like doing it, because that's going to be a problem. And that's going to cause problems for the, everybody.
Mike, I agree to that. I agree 100% that this needs to be done in a timely manner. There are instances that come up in the field where one sees greater stability can be achieved by expanding a weir here and there, or greater water quality can be achieved by slowing this area down or whatever, because they can see things in the field that they can't see in the design concept phase. That happens with everybody, actually. And that's why the state developed this 3-day period. But I would like to just suggest that you add in there the words to right after it was required immediately to maintain and or improve water quality and or stability, because those are the only reasons why you would make a change for is for water quality or stability in the long run and the larger storms.
Right, and that's fine. I mean, all that we are really requesting would help us, as I mentioned, is for there to be like a formal process by which we have a chance to, to review what is being proposed, and that we can come to a meeting of the minds. It doesn't have to be a federal case to do it. We can come quickly to a meeting of the minds as to what really is approved. And then our records are recorded accordingly, so that or the permit is modified according. LOD may have to change, whatever, things that are just administratively and legally required to be done for us to close out the job.
Yes.
Sam, it looks like you were saying something. Were you saying? Did you have something? Were you going to say something?
Yeah. I was actually. I think you all resolved it, but I would add that we have observed a tiered review situation with MDE, who of course are pretty rigorous, and they have adopted a series of tiered reviews and response times back. And it worked relatively well on a couple of projects. And I will share that with your staff as a proposal to insert into, you know, the process if you should choose so. It just makes it so that you can get minor revisions approved quickly. That's the key, because these communities cannot, I mean, this is grant money. We don't have, we can't do a ton of RFP, you know, requests for RFIs. We cannot, we don't have it. It busts the budget, it busts the time frame, and it's, you know, we're dealing with limited resources.
Right,
So
right.
everybody on the same team. Nobody's trying to pull anything over. This is
Mhm.
not, you know, pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. This is how can we expeditiously get the best possible project for the resources that we have in hand.
Correct, correct. And we're on the same page. I
I
understand
agree.
fully
I
what you.
just want to make sure that we
Mhm.
all are there.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. And the last phase is, okay, we've met all the requirements of the previous phases and the project is done. This is when as-built would be provided to the city. And as Mike mentioned, if there were any modifications to the design drawings that had initially been submitted, at this point, any red line changes would show on the as-built. The city, the Department of Public Works will go out after the project is done and inspect. If all requirements have been met and the project is built to plan, then the city would release the bond for this project, and that's done through the Department of Planning and Zoning. And then last but not least, post-construction monitoring and maintenance begins.
Now, if I could just make a suggestion that maybe something that maybe we don't have to put in the workflow as such, but it's just really something. I think that it would help if during construction, when your contractors stake out the stormwater areas or whatever areas they're going to build, if a quick meeting with city staff could just confirm that things are in the right place. At the end, I mean, if Matt goes out at the end or Mike goes out at the end and inspects and says, you built this wonderful thing, but something is in the wrong place. It really makes it difficult to release the bond. I think it's almost next to impossible to release the bond because you haven't complied with the bond. So the way to avoid that is to make sure that, you get they're nice guys, very helpful guys, very knowledgeable guys. And, they don't mind sort of just taking a look and saying, yes, okay, this is staked out correctly. And then you're good to go with building it, so that at the end, right, the inspection is more of a formality than sort of like a big exam, like a high pressure exam or something. It's not intended to be that. It shouldn't really be that. It should really sort of be something that just follows naturally from the process. And the same with the development of the as-built. The contractor should really, and they often don't do it, be developing their as-built as they go along, so that at the end, it's really a quick turnover. It's not like a major exercise to sort of do it. And Mike or Matt, I don't know if you guys want to sort of weigh in a bit on that, or Sam.
I wanted to add, because it's always a concern of mine, that in this final phase on post-construction, you've got monitoring and maintenance begins. I also think that you need to have, funding line item is established and will continue. You've had the budget folks take a look at it. I think it's very important that the city put this responsibility for whatever maintenance into its budget and be sure it's there. It's very easy to forget that. I suspect you're not the kind of person who will, but I just think it's important to add it there.
Right, agree.
I would like to just say in this last section, during the regulatory process inspections, I've noticed that there is more of a less of a recognition of the goals that are to be accomplished by the overall process. The water quality, is not observed. The stability, and I feel like people get so caught up in the trying to find something that's wrong, that something that doesn't quite fit, like four rocks being 4 feet from 4 feet from where they might have been. The overall concept of the restoration's goals to the contribution to the city's WIP of producing clean water, if it's producing clean water and if it's very stable, gets lost in the translation of what could be possibly wrong here. Are those trees planted 4 feet over from where they should be planted, that sort of thing. The environmental impact doesn't seem to be a part of that regulatory process.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that's necessarily what is happening. I think that what tends to happen when you permit something is that there are certain limits that are demarcated for certain use. Like if it's a reforestation area, you pretty much have to build within that area. You couldn't, take it outside or cut, or change those limits by other than something that is de minimis, right? As I mentioned. So yeah. I think that the way, as I was saying, that to avoid the sort of high pressure exam kind of a model is to sort of have like a collaborative, as you build, you communicate with Public Works. And if there is something that is really egregious for whatever reason, that it's far cheaper to address it and easier to address it before you've actually done the work, whereby you could come to, Matt or Mike or Betsy, if they go, whoever goes out, can say that, okay, we could make this change or whatever it is, or no, absolutely not, you can't make this change, and become to an understanding of how to ameliorate the problem. Or what you're suggesting. You would make your point, we would make our point, and somewhere in the middle we would kind of meet, right? And I think that sort of then removes the sort of high pressure, the sort of like, all or one, it's a real life or death kind of exam, and you can fail it and then your bond is held up and everyone is upset. That I think is avoidable by the process I sort of mentioned.
Yes. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to bring up was back to the initial review and the impact of that time in which your grant can be impacted. One of the things that impacted our grant at SPCA was the fact that there weren't as-builts of the stormwater pipe inventory. So I wonder if that might be something that we check in the very beginning, so that we don't run out of money and have to go back and recreate that.
Yeah, I think that during the preliminary meeting with that we could definitely answer that as to whether or not as built, and that's the time, as you pointed out, to before you apply to know whether or
Right,
not
before you
have
apply,
to
you know,
budget. Right.
right, you know what
Yeah.
you've got to do, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Can I ask an early on question, which I probably missed? We're talking about, so the Spot Creek Conservancy is meeting with a neighborhood who wants to do some stormwater retrofits on their property in their neighborhood, like their community property. If it's in the city limits, that any stormwater project we're talking about triggers the city to be involved in the initial meeting. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And for the reasons that we sort of laid out, right? That it's really we are here to support, and you know, it's a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship, and for it to really work in that way, it's really important that the city, which is by its natural structure bureaucratic, we are sort of like following regulations, enforcing regulations, and you guys are doing, you know, great environmental work, and the two are not mutually exclusive, but we have to understand what each party is trying to achieve and is mandated to achieve in our case. And then I think things go really smoothly in my experience, right? They will go a lot smoother.
And
Mr. Johnson, one thing that I have advocated on the commission is that it not only be this type of practice or policy at the city level, but also at the county and the state level. Because as you know, our environmental challenges do not stop at city lines ending. Mm-hmm. And as a sustainability professional, that's a kind of a given. You can look at what took place in Arlington County, and how they were able to become considered the second Copenhagen of America. And that is by their ability to coordinate among county and state government, to have them not only participate in the commission meetings, but also give reports on those exact same type projects so that coordinations could be made.
So Ken, Randy, thank you for that beautiful segue into what Mike was our next step. Mike, you can tell them about what's going to happen in early August with the county.
Oh, with the county, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have a joint meeting between ourselves and Anne Arundel County to sort of compare the workflow process for these sorts of projects, right? Working with the same partners. And the purpose of it, to sort of what Randy was sort of mentioning, the intent is exactly that we really want to get best practices and incorporate best practices wherever we find them. And in this case, we have a wonderful example with our partners in the county to sort of incorporate some of their practices into our workflow and to share what our thinking is and sort of cross-pollinate in that way, right? The ultimate objective, the underlying objective is really to make this process, which is very beneficial, extremely beneficial, work smoothly. We do, as when we do public works projects, we do not want adversarial relationships. We strive never to have those. Those never work well, right? It just enriches lawyers. And I'm no offense to any lawyers who are on the call, right? On the meeting, right? But we want to have collaborative working relationships. And the partnerships that we have with our not-for-profits are really, really important. And we want, and in my examination and estimation, that if we make these few tweaks that are mentioned, which are fairly, not major tweaks, I see things going really smoothly and projects moving at a much faster pace and bonds being released much faster and everything was kind of go, the environment will benefit and the city will benefit. So in our meeting with the county, which I think many people on this, some people on this call are also invited to that meeting as well. We will sort of go over, we will take what you have mentioned here and sort of do final tweaks to our workflow. And then we will present that and hear what their approach is and sort of have an open dialogue about, ways in which we can improve.
Excellent. Great.
Yeah, and also I know that there's been frustration in the past with how slowly things were moving, and this process is supposed to move that along. And also we have an additional stormwater engineer. Some of you may have already met Mike Rosberg. If not, you've met him today. But that should help with moving our permit process and inspections and at sites.
Right.
And are tree plantings considered part of stormwater projects?
They are. You know, they
Yeah.
do provide you know, stormwater
Yeah.
benefits. Mhm.
Would they have to be near water directly, or could it be not directly
They
in the
don't,
water?
they don't necessarily have to be near the water. I think they can help to stabilize, you know, areas that, you know, might
Okay.
be at risk of slowing or something like that, right? The roots,
I'd,
stuff like that.
I'd like to use this time to set up a meeting, first project, so, while I got everybody on the call here.
What
No, I'm
project do you have in mind?
Well, I just, you know, I'm just thinking sitting here while I have everybody on this call, one thing that we've been trying to do is use our, you know, Anne Arundel County and the city of Annapolis losing its tree canopy as fast as it has been, most in the state, to use this opportunity to not only encourage some workforce development, but also environmental literacy, and also actually planting trees. So using, you know, minority-owned businesses or to facilitate tree planting projects throughout the city is something that I've been very adamant about. So I don't know, maybe this could be an opportunity to take a tour of, you know, some locations, maybe some hacker communities or even surrounding areas, and just see where we can put some grant funding together and plant some trees. You know,
Yeah,
I think that
I mean, that's a good idea. I mean, it's a
yeah,
good idea.
yeah.
So if you want to set something up, I mean, I'd be glad to sort of do that. And I know that DNR has grants that support tree planting. They do a lot of that, and you know, that's an excellent type of project that is that's really good, and it helps to sort of restore the tree canopy that you mentioned, right? And
Randy, can I say something? Spot Creek has started a partnership with the Greater Parole Community Association about doing tree plantings on the outer West Street out there, you know, the business corridor of West Street through Parole. It's just getting started. I've walked the area with Rhonda Pindell and with Terrence Wright and Lon Powell, and so we've looked at a lot of locations. So I'd love to talk to you about that. It's mostly businesses that we're looking at, you know, planting it on businesses to add some greening and cooling to the West Street corridor out there,
Yeah.
which is in desperate need of it.
That's great, Amy. I'm really glad to hear that. And you coordinated it all with Brian Adams, the city forester?
Well, we haven't, I mean, you know, I've identified spots and locations, but I haven't talked to Brian about the exact locations.
Okay, yeah, but include him when you get there, okay?
Yeah.
Thanks. That's great news. Thanks.
And Randy, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah, and Randy, there's another great project on Rowell Boulevard. You know, with all of those trees that are under stress from the English ivy on them, to create a project from that and put more shade along the along Rowell Boulevard coming in.
Well, who's spearheading that, Betsy?
That would be a great project.
Oh, that's just okay. Proposal. Okay.
I don't know that I have time for it, but
right. Well,
while we got everybody on the call,
we did go over time, and I knew you guys would have lost the questions. We should have just budgeted more time, but we do have city staff on the phone too, on the line. So anybody have any more questions before we wrap this up?
I have one that reflects on what Mike had talked about, which I totally agree with. We don't want adversarial situations. What do we do? I'm thinking specifically of the project at St. Mary's and the fact that the Historic Preservation Commission is against their proposal to establish a living shoreline because it's not historic. And so we have a sort of looking backward to preserve what was versus, I think, the need to what's gonna be and needing to armor appropriately our shorelines with the water right. That's within the city, different people have different mandates. From a resiliency point of view, that's really what I think we're going to have to do. And I don't know how you deal with the historic folks on that, or that's my bias.
Could I interject here? I would like to say that there is nothing more crucial right now as we see the West burning up and torrential downpours flooding out Germany, that this is not, that environmental projects, ecological projects should trump anything, anything and every other project.
Right.
Because, it's here, it's real, and it's only getting worse. So we have to act more quickly and have more projects like Randy just mentioned and Amy just mentioned, everything we can possibly do to reduce the temperature and protect our natural resources like food.
And a workforce.
Yes, and a workforce. Yes. So it trumps everything. And I think when the city makes that decision to expedite ecological restoration, then everybody else has to step aside. I really think so.
And this constituency that we're here, we all agree. We all are environmentally conscious folks, and we understand that which hour is striking, so to speak, environmentally on the planet. But we don't control the historic commission, or the fact is we have one and we don't control it. And there's sort of, our code is written in such a way that certain agreements, certain concurrence of projects has to be satisfied before, we can't like Trump overrule them. That's not really possible.
But there is a very legitimate argument that the historical commission should be joined jointly with the environmental commission, in that we have to take back a lot of this hard structure that we built during the last century. We have to stop it. We have to reverse this, and they should be on the same plane as the environmental commission and the budget committee, for that matter.
Let me jump in real quick here. So the environmental commission that Randy sits on, they did provide a letter of support for the project to the Historic Preservation Commission that said, they appreciated the letter and they understand the points and they're trying to work through them. The members of that commission, there's a fair number of them that do support the project. They understand the resiliency part of it, the environmental benefits, especially resiliency benefits, and they understand, there's a need to do something there. They feel bound by the Department of Interior standards for historic properties, and we're a historic, national historic area, so we have to comply with those the federal standards. Now, there are new federal guidelines that have come out, and they are being revised, and they've had a bunch of different conferences on the need to revise historic preservation guidelines and requirements to promote resiliency efforts.
Excellent.
And the St. Mary's group has been working with me and with our staff, our historic preservation staff, on a modified design that will satisfy their historic requirements, but also to educate the commission further on the changes that are being made by the Department of Interior, so that they don't feel so bound. You can see that they're very frustrated, like they get the project, but they are bound by certain requirements. And as Mike said, city staff and mayor even cannot force the Historic Preservation Commission to make a decision one way or the other.
Right.
When it comes from the feds. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you change the interior, that will happen. And also, just on the city council that there should be a recognition that this work really should take priority over everything else. Well, there are a lot of other things like crime and those sort of things, but to be realistic, we have to expedite that. We have to move faster than what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. So there's been some really excellent suggestions on this workflow. We really appreciate all of your time. We'll take those all and start working on our draft that we'll then share with the county. And anything else you want to say, Mike, before you wrap up?
No, that's it. I think it was a great meeting. Thank you, for the input. I think that this helped to sort of like add, value added to what we put together. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I've had some comments from other people that couldn't attend today. So we'll look at those too. Okay.
But I, as a new person, I found this, I understand what the cabinet meeting will feel like. I think this sort of work group approach is very educational for me and a chance to, I hope we can continue having these kinds of meetings as well.
Okay, great. That I thought that you would appreciate that. And I think with regard to certain issues, including I know certain people are really concerned with the comp plan, and we can get planning and zoning staff involved with that and do a separate meeting just on that, because the larger meetings are with more of the city staff and with the mayor, and it's your opportunity really to discuss issues that you have, ideas that you have, suggestions, plans, that maybe we can help you implement with the mayor. That's your chance to interact with him. So I will be speaking with each of you individually and planning the September meeting for our agenda. And we'll hopefully get a date very soon for that. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Tom Gay, before we sign up, what Tom? You're just waving, Tom? Okay. All right. Thank you everyone very much.
Okay, thank you.